panel, very patient. They were kind enough to stay with me through this. Former U.S. Army Intelligence Officer Andrew Peek has been listening, as well as American Majority CEO Ned Ryun, and Democratic strategist Pablo Manriquez, who I sadly had to cut off. I am so sorry. As the president, he's the president. All right. Well, what do you think? I mean, he gave a lot of specific examples about MS-13 and the things that they have done in this country.
He did. He really, really did. And honestly, I'm really disappointed with the president right now. I give him the benefit of the doubt a lot. But this was scripted.
Why are you disappointed?
Well, because this was scripted by a bureaucratic opportunist named Thomas Homan, the director of ICE. He gives this speech all the time. There's nothing original about it, and it's highly misleading. Basically, what Thomas Homan likes to do is detain as many people as he can, and the ones who he doesn't have a real reason to keep, he blames them. He identifies them as gang members all of a sudden, or drug dealers, or affiliated with this, or affiliated with that. And the problem is that if the president buys into this terrible, terrible, loose, freewheeling public policy of ripping families apart, it's not going to make our country stronger, and it's not going to make our country safer.
Pablo, we are focused on looking at illegal immigrants, and especially, as Donald Trump said, violent illegal immigrants. And you think about some of the policies he's enforcing when you say, well, he's trying to use the federal government to make these cities, because these local cities, especially the sanctuary cities, are trying to subvert the rule of law. So I see nothing wrong with this. If you're going to go and say, we're going to put the American people first and we're going to protect those who should be here legally, they can stay. Those who are violent illegals, this is a no-brainer, Pablo. So not only did he talk about that, but Cheryl, the other thing that I thought was very interesting, a couple things, we're going to build that physical wall. And it's really about 1,000 miles of physical wall, probably going to cost $20 to $22 billion. Someone made the equation. It's basically an aircraft carrier and a half. That's great. Well, let's do it. Let's put that border wall in place, because you know what? At the end of the day, fundamentally, you cannot have national sovereignty if we're not protecting our borders.
You know, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Ned. I want to take that to Andrew. You know, of course, your experience in intelligence and law enforcement. He said real wall. I mean, he was very specific in his language, and I think that's telling us something.
Absolutely. You know, he clearly thinks of himself as a wartime leader. You know, he likes to use wartime imagery. He uses violent imagery. And I think he is an effective communicator, frankly, when he does that. I think he's actually much more effective when he's talking about these kind of life and death issues than communicating on things like health care and taxes. So if I were the White House, I would take that competitive advantage and say, okay, to get us going again, to get our legislative agenda moving again, I want to use this MS-13 policy initiative, translate that into a big push on immigration, and really restart our momentum legislatively.
You know, one of the things, though, Pablo, that I heard...
He's right, though, Cheryl.
But Pablo, there's one thing I thought was very interesting, and I know you're going to have something to say about this, is he talked about a quote, pathetic mayor. And those of us here in New York know he was... about Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York. This is a sanctuary city. And he basically said, you know, holding back good policing. He was surrounded by law enforcement, many of them New York law enforcement, Pablo. They're the ones that are on the ground dealing with the crime here in this city. He's got a point.
Well, I mean, I think the president is a very effective bully. Unfortunately, he's not very intellectually curious. If you actually looked into what the policies that he's approving, they don't just make cities less safe. They make the individual physical security of the police officers on the streets of our communities less safe. One of the federal grants that sanctuary city legislation is actually designed to withhold from local police departments is the ones they use to buy bulletproof vests. Now, he could not say that's a Sessions one. That's a Jeff Sessions policy. That's not a Thomas Homan policy.
Okay, yeah.
So I think like his people are giving him bad advice. They're mixing bad policy into what he says, and ultimately, it just time and time again it makes him look like somebody who isn't the art of the deal that is so central to his brand.
That really wasn't my question. My question was what's happening in New York City and in cities across the country, in particular in sanctuary cities where violent crime is up, and a lot of times, whether it's I don't care if it's California, New York, Arizona, it comes down to illegal immigrants committing violent crimes. Drunk driving, the list goes on, and I don't have any more time. I wish I did with all of you, but I do appreciate you sticking around and listening, of course, to the president and giving me your analysis, all of you. Andrew, Ned,
Thanks,
Pablo,
Cheryl.
guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right, we'll be right back.